Welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, one of the many podcasts here out of XenTegra. I'm your host today, Phil Sellers. I'm the practice director here for Modern Data Center at XenTegra. And, this is one of the many podcasts that we run. We like to call it Content with Context because we take the best content from the interwebs and we try to bring real world experience from our own customer base, from our past experiences in different roles, and just bring real life to the content we review here. So, want to say welcome. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. As usual, I can't do this alone, so I've got great co-hosts riding along with me today. So first up, we've got Mr. Andy Greene, a solutions architect here at XenTegra. Andy, this is month number 4 for you, or we're about to start month number 4 for you. So how are things going so far as a solutions architect?
Things are going great. It's been a really good ride so far, and like you said, we're about to join month 4, but can't wait for everything to come.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing great work already. I know our customers are enjoying our conversations that you're having with them about their technology. We're also joined by Chris Calhoun, also a solutions architect here on the team. Not the new guy anymore, thanks to Andy. But Chris, you've been around the block now for over half a year. What's probably the funnest conversation you've had with a customer so far?
Um, I'll tell you a quick story. So, one of the customers went in asking questions about Nutanix, and he started at a high level and tried to not show his hand, but he was definitely a steward and a student of his craft. He
Hmm.
actually knew the ins and outs of Nutanix very well, and asked real specific questions about the product, the benefit, the features, how it would help him. And I basically called him on it. I said, hang on, I can tell right now you've done your homework. And so then we get into, hey, there's blog forums, there's Reddit articles, there's podcasts, even pointed him to this podcast. So he obviously was really appreciative of that reality check of, hey, yeah, you got me. I'm definitely interested in Nutanix, but I didn't want to oversell. So it was really enjoyable just to talk with him about where he was in his journey and his interest of Nutanix. So I would definitely say that that was one of my best customer conversations.
I love that. And it goes to the heart of why we do this podcast and so many other things here, all the free events, free education. We love an educated customer. So it does make it fun when we get to have those conversations together. We're also joined by Ben Rogers. Ben is a sales engineer, senior sales engineer over at Nutanix in the enterprise space, longtime friend of XenTegra and myself. Ben, what's the coolest kind of conversation you've had recently with the customer?
Oh, this is going to be a good one. I did a partner event a couple of weeks ago, and I had an opportunity to talk to a customer that's in a regulated industry, and they were telling us about we were talking about AI and how they were deploying AI, and they were telling us about how they were using drones for perimeter security. They have some
Hmm.
highly regulated environments that they need to basically every now and then send a drone around the perimeter to make sure everything's cool, and so we started asking questions like, you're sending the drone out. What is it looking for? And it was basically like anomalies. So they fly around once, they fly around twice, see something different. They send that to an AI engine. They figure out if they got to deploy security out there or not. And then we started talking about, where is that going to go? And they were like, it could be all kind of things. It could be used for, man, ISP providers wanting to look at outages and problems at outages instead of sending people out, send drones out. And so
Mhm.
all kinds of wild applications that we started talking about. But this whole AI thing a couple of months ago at GTS, I kind of had a kick in the pants moment where I realized that AI was not just about how I communicate to customers about it. It's
Mhm.
about how I'm interacting with it and how I'm learning it as an individual to basically keep up with the environment in my time. So interesting stuff. Probably one of the most fascinating, fun conversations I've had lately. What's cool about it though is AI directly goes into the conversation that we're having today, which is about NKP and containers. Man, they're kind of one and the same. You can't have one conversation without having the other one.
Absolutely. Yeah, you teed it up perfectly for us. And it's funny, you're talking about your customer there. I've also heard of applications in the insurance industry, anywhere that need inspections and stuff, different industrial sites that need inspections, or even just homeowners insurance, looking at a roof and things like that. There's all sorts of new applications, and um, the ability to augment photo and video and do analysis on it is really going to change the way we interact and do business in a lot of industries over the next decade.
Oh,
Uh,
I mean, this is kind of wild to think about. And man, I'm really going to age myself here. I'm post 50, so I'm in the last quarter. I would assume the last quarter of my career. AI is like what electricity was when it was introduced, whenever that was. This AI is going to change the way we live life and man, the way the future is going to be. I mean, you talk about all kinds of things. I got a friend of mine that's a stockbroker that's talking about he's looking at doing AI for all of his paper process.
mhm.
So they sign a contract and the 180 documents they have to deal with and make sure I's are dotted and T's are crossed. They're looking at AI that. So it's again, man, I had a moment where I was like, I've got to be interacting into this and get myself immersed in it just to stay with the times, man. And so cool
Yeah,
stuff, interesting, but all part of day to day and living in IT.
that's it. Others on the call might say it's the best thing since sliced bread. I didn't see his head pop up when I said that, but we got a bread lover on the podcast with Chris Calhoun, so we like to give him a hard time. He's a huge fan of sourdough bread.
I
Right.
heart bread.
We may have had that meme going back and forth in Slack earlier today. So,
I never knew.
Absolutely.
well,
Yes to carbs.
yeah, got a carb load from Mr. Calhoun. But you did. You teed it up perfectly for us today. Underneath a lot of these cool AI conversations is a different way of running infrastructure. And so today's blog post that we want to talk about is why you should run Nutanix Kubernetes Platform on Nutanix Cloud Clusters. So couple of different phraseology type things here. Nutanix Cloud Clusters, also known as NC2, which can run on Azure or AWS and certain other cloud platforms. I know there's partnerships with other service providers. And so it's the same Nutanix that we know and love, just running inside of a hyperscale environment, running on their bare metal hardware nodes, connected into their network. And then secondly, we've got Nutanix Kubernetes Platform. And I kind of want to just take this opportunity because we've mentioned Kubernetes a couple of times on the podcast here recently. Back up from that just a little bit. What is Kubernetes or K8s, and what does it actually do? And so for that, we'll take kind of a 101 primer and say, there's really two ways to run different applications. So we've got virtual machines, which has been the typical way we run on Nutanix, on VMware. Yeah, everything lives inside that virtual machine, and it's a fully encapsulated operating system. So you've got the full stack there. And then this new style of operating called containers came around, where it's a very skinnified, think skinny margaritas, right? Um, it's a skinnified version of just what's needed to run the application. So now you don't have the full operating system. It's more of a just in time, very reliable, very repeatable version of an application. Everything packaged it needs to run, it comes online the same way every single time so that you can deploy it out at scale. So, with all these little containers running around, you need some way to manage those, some way to connect them together, some way to orchestrate them. And that's what Kubernetes is. Takes these containers, takes these little encapsulated applications that get deployed the same way every time, and allows you to scale those out, scale them up across environments, and manage them in a way that is highly orchestrated. So you can inject variables into those containers, but every one of those containers looks and acts the same. As an old school admin, and I think Chris, you probably will confirm this, but as soon as you deployed a virtual machine, it deviated from that golden master. Unless it was a Citrix machine, pretty much there were differences, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the age-old problem is as soon as you make a clone of a virtual machine, it starts to become a snowflake. It starts to change in ways where it's very inconsistent. Containers gives you a way of making it very consistent every single time so that that consistency then drives the same outcome every single time. So that's kind of the power behind all of this. But as we talk about Kubernetes and specifically Nutanix Kubernetes Platform, we're talking about an orchestration layer, right? And so it helps us manage containers at scale, and it answers all the questions of how do we get traffic to them? How do we get metrics from them? And so we'll talk about all of that through today's podcast. But Dwayne Lessner wrote this blog post. He's a technical marketing manager over at Nutanix, and he poses the question: why should you run Nutanix Kubernetes Platform on Nutanix Cloud Clusters? And so let's dive in and see what he has to say. So off the top of it, Andy, I'll throw it to you. What is the primary reasons that Dwayne gives us for running Kubernetes platform on cloud clusters?
I think it really comes down to Nutanix being a platform, right? So it's got the combination of virtualization tools that are built into NC2, and then to add to that, we now have container-based tooling that are built into NKP. Mm-hmm. So by running all of this in an ecosystem of technologies, our clients get a consistent operating environment wherever they need, whether it's in the cloud, in the data center, or at the edge.
So short version on that, we can run both, right? We can do both. That's a great benefit. Ben, you and I, we had sort of a little bit of a banter back and forth before we started recording. And there's an unofficial reason, too, that I think is compelling and that we should talk about. And what was that one?
So you're talking about, we were talking about, do you hypervise your container environment or do you not hypervise your container environment? And there's a big debate on that. Us at Nutanix feel like you need to hypervise that. So you're running AHV, and AHV is AHV is AHV, whether running on-prem or in NC2 in Azure or NC2 in AWS. And the reason we feel like you need to run the hypervisor is because that's what the hypervisor was built for. It was built to manage the hardware and be able to slice and dice that hardware in an optimized fashion. Kubernetes can do that, but we don't think that that's what the purpose of it was built for. It was not built to run as a hardware manager. It was built to run to be able to seamlessly deploy applications and orchestrate that. And so again, just going back to best practice, having AHV as the underlying component of NC2 and running NKP on top of AHV is going to give you the best use of that IaaS hardware that you're leasing from Microsoft. So to us, it's just a better, more efficient way of managing the hardware, which is then going to come down to managing cost. And I hate to say that NC2 is a cost-effective solution, but in the end, when you do ROIs on it, it is a cost-effective solution for running your VMs and also now your containers.
Yeah, so not only do you get that operational efficiency of having it consistent across the board, no matter the destination, but as you said, you let the hypervisor handle the discrete different node types, and then you can work on things above that in the stack. So, one of the things we kind of talk about with Kubernetes is it's sort of like dial tone, right? It's sort of like electricity. You turn the switch on and it works. And so Kubernetes can be that kind of equalizer across clouds. And again, here it's sort of that substrate where all your applications can run. It can be that consistent thing that you're managing, with the hypervisor helping you manage the hardware differences below that. So I do think that's a compelling benefit.
Man, I'll give a shout out to my manager, Tom Powell here. What he says is we give the ability to have VMs and containers, both first-class citizens in one cluster.
Absolutely. And Chris, there's another compelling reason that we can call out as well, and it has to do with kind of the core of Nutanix, right?
Absolutely. And that goes to exactly what both Andy said as Nutanix as a platform and Ben just mentioned. Hey, both virtual machines and containers are first-class citizens because of really the innate built-in capabilities of Nutanix. The desire for Kubernetes, as what's been mentioned, is consistency, the platform. Well, all of that consistency really revolves around the data services that are really needed by a Kubernetes or a containerized solution.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, the benefit there is the persistent storage performance. That's what the app developers are looking for whenever they are looking for that landing zone, whether it is an on-premises environment or a cloud model. They've got to have that consistent, tried and true performance from both the storage level as well as offering up an objects-based storage platform too that Nutanix does within their unified storage platform. That's even though it obviously has many uses, and at the time that files and all of those others came out, I don't know that it was specifically geared or focused more towards Kubernetes, but now seeing the two, that's a match made in heaven. That's butter and bread, if you will, in the sense that the two just go together. Really makes sense for customers to really focus on, hey, I know the performance and capabilities of Nutanix, and I need that exact same performance capabilities in my data services platform. Let's merge the two together, and that's where I think Nutanix is a good fit for operating containerized environment.
Good callback on the butter and bread there, my friend.
I think another thing that's cool, man, going on with what Chris says is if you look at the paragraph there that talks about the enterprise capabilities, we're bringing compression, erasure coding, all those good things that we do at a disk system level with AOS. We're bringing that to the cloud. And those are normally features that are add-ons a la carte to your data services. So again, we're just bundling all that into our license.
Yeah,
to Ben's point, let me say this too, because if you think about how public cloud models often are a shared infrastructure, and without that dedicated performance, that's what's going to be lacking. And obviously, that's one of the core tenets of Nutanix running in a public cloud is having that dedicated environment and utopia, honestly, of resources. So having those reserved dedicated instances for performance and not a shared environment is really key to foundational success for Kubernetes.
Well, and that's a key point, right, Chris? So you talk about the dedicated clusters. What does that actually translate into to an enterprise at a business level? And that's control, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to control your stack, you get to control the version of software you're deployed on, and you have guaranteed performance levels that are different than you get in the shared computing models of the hyperscale native environments. And so you get to expect the same sort of things that you have from a guarantee of service on-prem in your own co-location, now with the flexibility of having someone else's regions, locations, and a lot of other benefits. Let's dig into this. So as the blog post goes on, we talk about it as a cost-effective solution. First thing here is talking about available capacity. In C2, we can scale up to 13 nodes. And when we talk about scale in a Kubernetes environment, this is an interesting call out that Dwayne makes, but Kubernetes clusters by default only support 110 pods per node. So a little bit of terminology here. A pod is the concept of um, a management domain inside of a Kubernetes cluster. So across multiple different machines, you create your pods, but there are some limitations here. So Dwayne calls out, as you scale, you risk wasting resources with larger nodes. So this goes to Ben's point about the hypervisor. Now you mix and match VMs with Kubernetes workloads. You get more efficient use of your larger nodes in your larger hardware. So I do think that definitely supports kind of your theory about introducing the hypervisor as an advantage to the overall system. So from a cost-effective standpoint, that definitely makes sense. It would also make sense that we can engineer multiple instances and greater scale on a hypervisor because just like with virtual machines, we're breaking up this Kubernetes workload into multiple different workload domains across the same host. So we get both of those. Ben, you called out the next thing that Dwayne talks about, which is storage. Right now in NC2, everything is NVMe. So we get not just great performance, but extremely great performance. Do you want to talk a little more about storage when it comes to the cost effectiveness?
Sure. So, the other thing about the storage that I'd like to say is, we also have, the replication services behind it and all that we're going to talk about that later in the thing. But again, it's just these are high speed performance servers that we're leveraging in NC2, in Azure and in AWS. So, managing the micro waste, having the flexibility of adding nodes and depleting nodes as you need to scale up and scale out or scale in. And then also having the performance with the NVMe and SSD in the nodes. It's just a great solution. And all these are things that if you looked at it from a native cloud, let's say you went to Azure and you tried to put all these things into, a list, you would be paying a la carte for most of these things, which would make your cost very much skyrocket. So again, we're delivering in one license blend all of the services that you really need to run this simply with flexibility and with performance. And I think that's really what Dwayne's getting here with most of this. And on the performance side is that this comes with the AOS NC2 license day one. These are not services you have to add on. These are not services you have to purchase. They're going to be there for you the first day that you come into the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Your data services is a huge benefit, and as we talk about replication and other things here shortly, that really is going to come into kind of play. Networking is also a huge concern. Andy, I'm going to throw it to you from a networking conversation.
Yeah, well, I think Kubernetes is very chatty over the network. Managing the management, the worker nodes, having everything spread out across different availability zones. Our clients end up paying for the data that's transferred between, say, the management and the worker nodes, as well as all of that traffic between the cluster and the other cloud services as well. I think what we're seeing here is probably a good example of data gravity in action. We know that applications, services, and data tend to stick together. And data gravity itself can have a little bit of maybe a negative connotation for making it difficult and sometimes costly to move our applications and move our data in an efficient manner. But what Nutanix is really demonstrating here is some of the value of bringing all of the data, the applications, and the services into that single platform. So, by doing that, we're going to see the benefits that we've been talking about: performance, cost, scalability, mobility. All of that through having these services and these applications on a single platform.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of times I call these cloud soft costs, and you can't see me if you're listening, but I've got my air quotes, my fingers doing air quotes. But these are the cloud soft costs, right? We don't do a good job of estimating, and I'll say that even for us as a team working with our clients, we sometimes can't quantify all of these incremental small costs that add up when you're running in hyperscale, either AWS, Azure, GCP. And so these egress costs around networking can definitely make a huge monetary impact. But to your core point around data gravity, this is definitely data gravity in full force. Um, the other thing that you said too is you've got a full package here. And so I want to call out, if you're listening to this, definitely look up the blog post on nutanix.com/blog, because there's a great graphic here. And I call it the NKP sunburst. But I really like this sort of graphic because there's about 12 different layers inside of Kubernetes. And so we talk about Kubernetes as one thing, but this does a good job of kind of breaking it up. And I'm just going to recap some of these, not all. But you have to make a networking choice. You have to make a storage choice. You have to make a security, service mesh, ingress, delivery controller, cost management, observability, automation. All of these are different choices you have to make when you're doing a Kubernetes strategy. The great thing about NKP and what we're getting here is you can use the built-in, because Nutanix is delivering an opinion, a choice of each one of these different 12 layers, or you can plug in your own. There's support for other CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation projects that can plug in with NKP. So NKP is very what we call a pure sort of product stack. It's very close to the open source. There's not a lot of customization. There's not a lot of changes to what the open source Kubernetes project is. There are certainly enhancements and reasons to buy NKP, but it's a very pure sort of deployment. And so you're getting that close adherence to open standards with all of the necessary layers to be able to fully bake your Kubernetes strategy. And so that's huge, right? I would say, in less words, they're delivering the Staples easy button for Kubernetes. You remember that one? That was easy.
And that's pretty powerful, because we go into a lot of K8 shops that they're struggling to make these decisions. I mean, you've got the K8's environment, and then you've got, what you're calling the sunburst around it. And to your listeners, I would go and look at this graphic, because basically what this graphic is showing us is all the things you got to have to really have a full-blown Kubernetes environment. And with it being open source, that's a great thing. I love open source, but it's also a complex thing, because then you have to make decisions on what's best for your environment. And we take that complexity out of you by giving you a platform, making these decisions for you. Now, you're not bound to these decisions. These are decisions that we make. You can change them if you want. But if you decide to stay under our umbrella, not only are you getting a complete platform day one, but you're getting the life cycle management behind that platform. So if you stay in this sunburst that Phillips called it, you then have management ability from then on, because as these things, enhance and grow and have changes made, you're going to want those to be brought into your environment, and you're not going to want to deal with these as individual pieces. So again, we're bringing that under a sunburst umbrella. We're giving lifecycle management. We're giving you the best of practice that we know of. And NKP, the guys that came along with that, I'm going to give a little history lesson here. That was a merger with a company called D2IQ, which was Mesosphere. And man, these are guys, Toby, Dan, and Bruce, these are guys that were ground floor of the CNCF Foundation. I mean, these are guys that know Kubernetes inside and out. It is their lifestyle. And so I feel very good and very opinionated when we bring this product in, because I know it is the collection of services that somebody needs to operate a Kubernetes environment day one. And it is a platform that can be managed post day one in the day 2, day 30, day 60, day 365. So again, a powerful platform that is built to run on our hypervisor day one. So man, I am very proud that we have the ability to supply this to our customers.
Yeah, it is, and not to steal your thunder there. I mean, it is made to do amazing things on the Nutanix platform, but it's also still open. This runs on AWS, on Azure, on GCP, on bare metal. There's lots of choice on VMware. There's lots of choice for NKP. Now, you may not receive all of the goodness, and so I think that's the core of what we're talking about here in this blog post is it really is a better together story, right? NKP plus the Nutanix cloud infrastructure provides you with extra benefits. And so a lot of that does kind of come back to, the things we talked about, data services, the hypervisor, the portability, the orchestration, the easy button, if you will, across the platform to make it easier to operate the same way.
I'm gonna throw one more in there. 90 plus NPS score on your support. You get in trouble, you can call us. We'll help you.
Yeah, best in class support. That has to go a long way when so many of us are frustrated with how poor support is in a lot of places inside the IT industry. Let's talk a little bit about this one. Dwayne goes on to talk about mobility, the freedom to move across environments. Chris, I'm going to kind of send this one over to you, and let's talk mobility a little bit because this is a huge benefit to the business, the stakeholders that you're working with as a technologist.
Absolutely. And this ties in too for some of our past few conversations in our podcast around the capabilities from a business perspective of being able to have the freedom to not get locked into a long-term technical and financial decision based off of where's my data located, going back to Andy's statement of data gravity. With Nutanix, you do have that freedom and that flexibility. And that's really an overarching, longer discussion and relates back to, like we said, past podcasts. But I really do believe that with a containerized operating model, that allows and lends itself to both business agility and technical abilities too. So think about this. What if it's a global based company that has specific needs for their industry, their business to keep regionalized data, but through mergers and acquisitions may have brought on other companies. With those other companies, they may need to run independent. And for that global company, one cloud vendor, meaning AWS, may be better suited for European-based workloads for this customer, let's say. But if they have any part of business dealings within the States, maybe it's Microsoft Azure that they need to leverage, just because of ELAs and those contracts that we've talked about in the past. Well, with Nutanix as a whole, just staying high level and not giving away the goodness of the next couple lines in the blog, that's the freedom and flexibility that you're looking for from the business perspective mindset is, do we have more than one choice? And with that, does that lend us freedom over the next year or two to have expansive capabilities in other markets even? So I think that that's really a key about this technology as a whole.
Well, and the fact that we're talking hyperscale here, but what if this strategy needs to be your edge? What if it needs to be close to your manufacturing floor? We're talking about the same consistent stack that can go cloud to edge and give you really the maximum amount of flexibility where you run and choose to run things. Dwayne calls this out. At the heart of data mobility is the Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes, or NDK. NDK is that thing that helps connect the core storage system to Kubernetes. And that helps specifically with containerized workloads, so that we get things like copy data management, data protection, DR. These are all things that we take as table stakes, but they change in a Kubernetes strategy versus what we're used to doing in terms of DR for virtual machines. Andy, I'm curious, how does that look with NDK and Kubernetes?
Great question. So, with NDK, we can take a snapshot that's going to include all of the application configurations, things like the Kubernetes resources, stateful sets, services, config maps, and secrets. And then through that snapshot, we're able to restore the application to a different site if we needed to. So for DR purposes, for data mobility purposes, we've got that ability to pick up our application and move it into another site. This is contrary to some of the cloud native block storage that's going to require third-party tools, higher RTOs for replication. NDK really simplifies the process without adding any additional overhead.
Well, I've heard it said like the perfect network is a network without users, right? It is the perfect application an application without data, the same sort of thing. Like, to me, data is the crown jewels. We've got to be able to protect that and move that around. And that's essentially what you're saying here, is that NDK gives us that ability with persistent volumes inside of Kubernetes workloads.
Absolutely.
Now you got to remember, Kubernetes is not just used for applications. They're starting to containerize databases as well. So when you look at, now you've got a Mongo database that's running inside a container. Well, guess what? You got to protect that container, because now you got active data that's being written to it and being read from it. So,
absolutely. And you're not just talking the new style databases, Oracle, SQL Server. There's a SQL Server that runs in a Linux that can run in a container. There's all sorts of things, but you're right? That persistent data is the key.
And a lot of people kind of forget that. That's kind of an after fact of, oh, we've gotten there, now what? And so we try to bring that point early on, is how are you not only deploying your container environment, but how are you protecting your container environment? And if you did have a disaster, how are you getting that back into production as quickly as you can? And that's where Nutanix is really starting to shine, because knowing where the zeros and ones are and how to handle those and how to get those protected and restore, that's where we started from, and we continue to build on that goodness.
Yeah, 100%. And it's cool that you started talking AI at the beginning of the podcast, because we're going to come full circle again here. As Chris was talking about the benefits of the platform, you mentioned object store. But when it comes to AI workloads, files is a huge, huge benefit, right? And a lot of AI, most AI is written on Kubernetes. They're written in containers. And so we did a whole podcast episode, Ben, Jira, and myself, talking about ML-perf storage and the amazing amount of throughput and performance you can get on Nutanix files, training and using files with the AI workloads. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a few episodes back, but look at the episode about ML-perf. But that just goes to kind of bring us full circle, right? You've got a suite of product around Kubernetes that enables the business to provide cloud services on your terms, the same way, no matter what destination you choose. And that takes us right into our next point, which is operational consistency across on-premises and the cloud. So, Chris, I'm going to throw it to you. For organizations with Nutanix and NKP, what's the huge advantage here from an operational standpoint?
To me, it goes back to a similar talk track from some of these other podcasts around having separate teams manage separate environments. It's basically one where you can now focus on having a operational consistent approach to a business workload. And that's really the idea of having a seamless environment of support and management, whether it's cloud or on-prem or at the edge, as we've all mentioned. And that's the model that you're really looking for, is not to have those siloed teams where one group manages one thing, another group manages a different location of cloud operating model, or something to that effect. It's staying in an agile environment where everything seamlessly works and it's managed the same way. So that's the consistency from an infrastructure perspective, a support model. That's really what you're looking for, that consistency across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, not having to retrain your team. And I think the fact that in general, on an NCI or a Nutanix cluster in general, we do what, about 15 minutes of training, and most administrators can pick it up from there.
Man, I just had my 14-year-old go through Move, and he was, outside of some terms he didn't understand. He didn't know what a VLAN was, but he was able to sit down and kind of go, okay, here's my source, here's my target, here are the objects I want to move from one to the other. And it was fascinating for me to sit down and go, how easy is this? And he picked it right up. I would like to add on to what Chris was saying, as far as consistency across on-premise and cloud. That can be AHV. So, if you're running AHV on-prem, you're running AHV in NC2, that's going to give you a nice seamless landscape. But it don't stop there. If customers are running EKS, AKS, in the Google, the container platform in Google, we can bring that in NKP, and we now can manage all of those silos for you under one umbrella. So it don't just have to be on AHV. It just doesn't have to be on Nutanix infrastructure. It can be in native Azure infrastructure, AWS infrastructure. That brings the point that Chris made with, you now take siloed teams and bring them together as one unit, and you don't have an Azure specialist or an AWS specialist. You have a Nutanix specialist that can work in any silo that you choose to deploy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the heart of Nutanix, right? Choice. Choice at all different levels and layers. And this is another great example of that. But, as Chris said, silo busting from the beginning, right? Breaking down the barriers between compute and storage teams. And that's been going on since day one, since you introduced your first product. So it's good to see that consistent strategy really play out, right? At the end of the day, what you're buying, and Dwayne wraps it up this way. I'm just going to read what he says. By running NKP on NC2, you gain a future-proof environment for all your applications, VMs, and containers. I couldn't sum it up better than that. So I'm just going to read the words from Dwayne. And I think it's the perfect way, right? You're giving yourself a future-proof solution because you're giving yourself choice at the end of the day. And I think that's the ultimate thing that kind of has been the thread throughout all of today's conversation, is you're giving yourself choice. Well, guys, I think this has been a really great conversation. I'm super happy to really get to dive in on NKP a little bit more. If Kubernetes is new for you, and that's somewhere that you want to talk more, reach out. My team, we're all here to have that conversation, to help you and your organization with strategy around Kubernetes, around containers. This is a journey that I think all of us have been on, either on the client side or working with our clients over the last 5 years as this strategy, as this technology has matured. So we'd love to talk to you more one-on-one. If there's enough interest, maybe we'll throw out a webinar or some other group event. So do reach out if you've got questions. We're always available. And for everyone listening, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.